Did you know that there may have been a deliberate reason why Disney has remained so quiet about the death of Cinderella's father and what really happened to him? It's because the real way that he died was much darker than anything a young mind should have to envision, at least according to this theory. In fact, if this theory is true, then it means that Lady Tremaine is more cold-hearted than fans of the film ever could have fathomed. Let's put it this way, you're not gonna believe how Cinderella's dad really passed away. Make no mistake, Lady Tremaine has always seemed like the human embodiment of evil. But according to this theory, she was so far gone that she outright murdered her husband in cold blood. You see, in the original animated classic and the brief glimpses that fans were given of Cinderella's father, he seemed perfectly healthy. So to find out that he died seemed a bit untimely, though it was a fact that was glossed over simply to progress the story. He wasn't the main character after all, but imagine he was for a moment. It's strange to consider the idea of a healthy, seemingly wealthy man just up and dying out of nowhere. And it was out of nowhere. In almost all versions of the Cinderella story, Sir Richard's death is described as untimely and sudden. It isn't outlandish to consider the idea that his death was orchestrated, most likely by someone close to him. And according to this theory, that person was none other than his second wife and Cinderella's stepmother, Lady Tremaine. Think about it. It wouldn't be out of character for the evil stepmother to do something along the lines of poisoning her husband. According to her character description, she was a very power-hungry and cruel person who was also shown to be very manipulative at times. Now, even though there's nothing in the movie to outright suggest or confirm that it was Lady Tremaine who caused Sir Richard's death, that doesn't mean it's impossible. And in case you were worried that the idea of a spousal homicide was something that would be too dark for a Disney story, you have to remember that almost every Disney film has a much darker origin, including Cinderella. In fact, in the original story, Cinderella's stepsister sliced their feet up in order to fit them into the glass slippers for the prince. So the idea of Lady Tremaine being behind her husband's death is something that is firmly within the realm of possibility with Disney. It just wasn't in the forefront of the film. But why exactly would someone like Lady Tremaine want to kill Sir Richard instead of simply coexisting with him in their wealthy lifestyle? Well, according to some versions of the story, it's because Sir Richard sold Lady Tremaine on a beautiful lie that turned the grieving woman's life into a living hell that she couldn't escape from. This is specifically covered in the book Cold Hearted by Serena Valentino when we find out the truth about the relationship between Cinderella's father and her evil stepmother. In the book, much like the animated movie, Lady Tremaine's marriage to Sir Richard wasn't her first marriage, as shown by her two daughters who had no blood relation to Cinderella. According to the book, Anastasia and Drizella were the children that Lady Tremaine had with her first husband back when she lived in London. According to the book, Lady Tremaine and her first husband lived a very happy life with each other all the way up until his untimely death. After that, though, Lady Tremaine, along with her two daughters, went into a mourning period that, according to Valentino, lasted about 6 years. In fact, it wasn't until Lady Tremaine met Sir Richard that she was finally able to continue with her life. Now, I know you might be wondering why she would even consider killing Cinderella's father if he was the first person she could love again after the loss of her first husband. But sadly, there's a solid explanation for it, and it's simply because Sir Richard sold her on a lie. According to Cold Hearted, the pair met at a party in London and supposedly fell head over heels in love with each other, or at least Lady Tremaine did. Sir Richard was very much in love with his late wife, Cinderella's biological mother, and frankly wasn't really looking for a wife. But still, he chose to lead Lady Tremaine on and even asked her, along with her two daughters, to move to his home in the many kingdoms. But do you think that Lady Tremaine really knew everything she was getting into before she accepted his invitation? You see, where Lady Tremaine was promised a life of love and luxury, she instead was thrown into a life of servitude for a family that she hardly even knew. All because Sir Richard was more in the market for a maid and a maternal figure for his daughter than he was for a new wife. Little did he know, his lie would wind up being his undoing and actually cause Lady Tremaine to end his life, at least according to this theory. And that's really not too far-fetched a concept. In Serena Valentino's novel, when Lady Tremaine was brought to Sir Richard's land, she was essentially forced to do all of the chores and tasks that she would thrust upon her stepdaughter in the animated original classic. All the while, Sir Richard apparently spent the wealth that her late husband had left her to pay off his debts and fund his own personal ventures. Now that's horrible if you ask me. But to make things even worse, Lady Tremaine couldn't leave even if she wanted to. So when she was left with no other option, she decided to kill Sir Richard, likely by poisoning him. By the way, that's not an exaggeration. Lady Tremaine was literally trapped in the many kingdoms. In Cold Hearted, it's mentioned that she made multiple attempts to reach out to her family and friends back in London to tell them of her horrible living situation. But all of her efforts proved pointless because every message she sent out was stopped by the fairy godmother and the odd sisters. In other words, no one was coming to help Lady Tremaine. And to make matters even worse for her, she wasn't alone. She had brought her two daughters with her, and now how Anastasia and Rosella were being neglected and treated poorly, all while they likely still mourned the death of their father. So, putting it all like that, is it really that far-fetched to consider the idea that Lady Tremaine had a hand in Sir Richard's death? Even if you don't consider the way that Sir Richard supposedly treated Lady Tremaine in the novel, the fact that she was depicted as being power-hungry is enough evidence to at least make her a suspect in the death of Cinderella's father. This was especially apparent in the third Cinderella movie, Cinderella 3: A Twist in Time. That movie was set a year after the events of the first movie, and during a strange turn of events, Anastasia ended up with the fairy godmother's wand, and that of course meant that Lady Tremaine wound up with the wand, who immediately fell in love with all of its power. She used the wand to change the course of history and make it as though Anastasia was the one that the prince fell for the night of the ball in the first film. However, throughout the movie, Anastasia begins to experience a change of heart. She even began to yearn for a true love of her own. This was when Lady Tremaine, in her iconic wicked ways, explained to Anastasia that love was virtually meaningless as long as you had true power. This showed just how power-hungry the evil stepmother really was at heart, and the moment works as great evidence for this story. If Lady Tremaine was truly as hungry for power as she appeared to be in all three of the animated Cinderella films, then why wouldn't she just take it for herself? It was right there, after all. Her husband was supposedly a powerful and respected man in the many kingdoms, hence his notable amount of land and his title as Sir Richard. So all she would have to do was make his death seem like an accident or illness, and all of the power that was once his would fall to Lady Tremaine. Even though it's not confirmed as canon, there's no proof that Lady Tremaine didn't play a part in the death of Cinderella's father. That being said, there are versions of the story that seem to contradict this theory more than others, and it's worth mentioning them, particularly the live-action retelling of Cinderella that Disney released in 2015. In this version of the story, the writers went much further into Cinderella's backstory, including her relationship with her mother and her father. At one point in the movie, they outright show Lady Tremaine wasn't involved in the death of her father. They do so by stating with certainty that Sir Richard had somehow contracted an illness that they couldn't rid him of. The illness proved to be terminal and led to his untimely death. As proof that Lady Tremaine wasn't involved in his death in the movie, the director made a point to show his late wife grieving. This proved that she loved Sir Richard and was truly sorry to see him gone. However, that didn't stop her from turning cold toward Cinderella quite quickly. Now, with all of that in mind, you can't entirely rule out Lady Tremaine's involvement in Sir Richard's death in the live-action remake, though it does seem unlikely. One moment that stood out that led me in particular to believe that she still may have played a sinister role in ending his life was the fact that it seemed like she smiled at his death. I mean, yes, she was shown in mourning, but that doesn't truly absolve Lady Tremaine of guilt, does it? Surely she could have still felt remorseful about losing someone she loved, even though she may have been the one to kill it. Guilt can do crazy things to a person. I'm curious to hear what you think about this theory, though. Did Lady Tremaine really play a part in the death of Cinderella's father? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.